What happens when the world counts you out? When every headline screams that you're finished? When the very same industry that once cheered you now turns its back and acts like you never mattered? For most people, that would be the end of the story. The curtain would fall, the lights would fade, and that would be it. But for Johnny Depp, that wasn't the ending. Not even close. His journey isn't just about fame or movies or money. It's about what happens when you lose it all, when you fall harder than anyone could have imagined, and somehow manage to stand back up. It's about how one man went from being treated like a pariah to becoming living proof that resilience, patience, and truth have a way of winning in the end. And here's why you'll want to stick with me through this whole story. By the time we reach the end, you'll see that Johnny Depp's resurrection in 2025 isn't just about Hollywood. It's about life. It's about every single person who's ever been doubted, written off, or told they couldn't rise again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll walk away from this story with something you can apply to your own life. Now, let's go back. Johnny Depp wasn't just another actor. He wasn't the kind of star you could swap out with someone else. He was different. He built characters that felt like living, breathing people. Captain Jack Sparrow wasn't just a pirate. He was the pirate. Willy Wonka wasn't just a quirky candy maker. He was unforgettable, bizarre, and magnetic in a way only Depp could pull off. For decades, he had this unique ability to disappear into roles. He didn't just act, he transformed, but fame has a dark side. And for Johnny, that dark side hit like a tidal wave. One day, he was Hollywood's golden ticket. Every studio wanted him, every director dreamed of working with him. The next, his name was treated like poison. Scandals, accusations, endless court cases, and a media storm that seemed to never end. It all piled up until Hollywood wanted nothing to do with him. Contracts that were once guarantees were suddenly gone. Roles were stripped away. Whole franchises that he had helped build turned their backs on him. For years, the headlines weren't about his work. They were about drama. They were about destruction. And for a while it seemed like Johnny Depp's career had been buried for good. But here's the interesting thing. The world didn't agree. The media was telling one story, but audiences, his true fans, felt something different. They didn't abandon him. They didn't walk away. In fact, they doubled down. They defended him online, they showed up at his concerts, they shared old clips and interviews to remind the world of who he really was. It was almost like Hollywood tried to erase him, but the people refused to let that happen. And that's where the first seeds of a comeback were planted. Now, imagine being in his shoes. Imagine the whole world watching as your life gets pulled apart, piece by piece. Imagine people you once worked with cutting ties not because of who you are, but because of how things looked. Most people would break under that weight. They'd lash out. They'd fight back in every interview, trying desperately to clear their name. But Johnny didn't. Instead, he stepped back. He chose silence over chaos. He stayed away from the endless back and forth. And while some saw that as weakness, it was actually something else entirely. It was strategy. Think about it. When people say things about you that aren't true, when the noise around you feels deafening, what's your first instinct? For most of us, it's to defend ourselves, to argue, to scream, "That's not me!" But here's the thing. When people have already made up their minds, words don't change them. Johnny understood that. He knew that sometimes the smartest thing you can do isn't to fight every battle. It's to let the storm pass. That silence, that choice to hold back, became his shield. It protected his energy. It gave him space to focus, to breathe, to think about what actually mattered. And that's something we can all learn from. Because how often do we waste energy trying to convince people who aren't willing to listen? Johnny didn't. He conserved his strength for the right moment, and then slowly, he started to rebuild. Fast forward to 2025. This isn't just Johnny Depp back in another blockbuster, collecting a paycheck, playing it safe, and fitting neatly into the Hollywood machine. No, what we're seeing now is something entirely different. This is Johnny Depp rewriting the very idea of what a comeback looks like. It's not just a return, it's a reinvention. Yes, he's acting again, and audiences are thrilled to see him back on the big screen. But here's the key difference. He's not simply sliding back into roles handed to him by powerful studios. He's being selective. He's choosing projects that speak to him personally, roles that carry meaning, scripts that allow him to create, not just perform. And in doing so, he's reminding us why we fell in love with his work in the first place. Because when Depp acts, it isn't just a performance, it's a transformation, but acting is only part of this new chapter. The bigger story is that Johnny isn't putting all his weight back into Hollywood's fragile, often cruel system. He knows that depending solely on that world would be dangerous. Instead, he's pouring himself into other passions: music, art, independent projects, things that Hollywood can't control, cancel, or manipulate. Let's start with the music. Johnny has always had music in his blood. Before he was ever an actor, he was a guitarist. Acting may have made him famous, but music was always his first love. Over the years, he's quietly nurtured that passion, playing with friends, recording and performing. And in the years when Hollywood turned its back, music became more than just a hobby. It became his lifeline. Now in 2025, music is not a side project, it's front and center. He's touring again. He's writing songs that tell his story in ways a movie script never could. When you listen to him play, you can hear the pain, the resilience, the joy, and the scars all woven into the sound. Fans don't just come to hear the music, they come to feel connected to him. They come to stand in the same room as a man who was almost erased, but refused to disappear. And then there's his art. For years, Depp has expressed himself on canvas, painting portraits, exploring colors, telling stories without words. What's fascinating is that his art exploded in popularity right when Hollywood wanted him gone. His collections sold out in hours. People wanted a piece of his soul, and that's what his paintings gave them. Raw, personal, unapologetic honesty. Art gave Johnny freedom. Unlike film, there were no scripts, no studios, no contracts. Just him and the canvas. In those brushstrokes, he could process the chaos, the loss, the betrayal, and turn it into something beautiful. That's part of his resurrection. He's not just creating art for himself, but for the world. And in 2025, his art isn't just surviving, it's thriving. Galleries clamor for his work. Collectors wait in line. Critics who once doubted him now acknowledge his raw talent. It's as if the very act of painting became both a rebellion and a rebirth. And then we come to the independent projects. This might be the most important piece of the puzzle. Hollywood has its rules, its gatekeepers, its politics. But Johnny learned the hard way that those rules can turn on you in an instant. So now he's building outside of it. Independent films, passion projects, collaborations with creators who care more about the art than the money. In this space, he has freedom. Freedom to take risks. Freedom to explore characters that studios might consider too strange or too risky. Freedom to tell stories that matter to him. And isn't that what true artistry is about? Creating for meaning, not for approval. So here's the powerful truth. Johnny Depp is proving something that Hollywood doesn't want people to realize. Real talent doesn't depend on a studio's approval. It doesn't depend on a PR machine or a headline or a carefully crafted image. Real talent speaks for itself. And when your gift is genuine, when your creativity is authentic, you don't need permission to share it. Think about how radical that is. For decades, Hollywood has positioned itself as the gatekeeper. They decide who's in and who's out. They decide who gets the big roles and who disappears into obscurity. But Johnny has cracked that illusion. He's showing that audiences don't need a studio to tell them who to love. They know, they've always known. And here's where his story becomes more than just about him. It becomes about all of us. How many times have you been told no? That you don't belong? That you're not good enough, not polished enough, not safe enough? How many times has a gatekeeper in your life, whether a boss, a critic, or even a so-called friend, tried to decide your worth for you? Johnny's resurrection is living proof that they don't get the final say. When he takes the stage with a guitar, he's proving it. When he sells out an art show in hours, he's proving it. When he steps into an indie film role that Hollywood never would have greenlit, he's proving it. Over and over again, he's reminding us that if your gift is real, it will find its way into the world. Now let's talk about the emotional side of this, because this isn't just about work. This is about healing. For Johnny, pouring himself into music, art, and film is therapy. It's how he processes everything he went through. The betrayal, the loss, the humiliation. Every brushstroke, every lyric, every performance, it's all a piece of his recovery. And fans connect to that. They don't just see a celebrity. They see a human being working through pain in the most honest way possible. And here's the thing, when people see honesty, they respond to it. Hollywood often thrives on illusions, but people are hungry for authenticity. That's why Johnny's resurrection feels so powerful. Because it's not just a career move, it's a deeply human story. So let's put it this way. In 2025, Johnny Depp isn't just making a comeback. He's making a statement. He's saying to Hollywood, "You don't own me." He's saying to his fans, "I never left you." And he's saying to anyone who's ever been written off, "There's always a way back." That's what makes this resurrection different. It's not about fitting back into the old mold. It's about breaking the mold completely. It's about showing that success doesn't come from bending to a system. It comes from being brave enough to step outside of it. So when you look at Johnny Depp in 2025, don't just see an actor returning to the screen. See an artist in every sense of the word. A man who acts, who sings, who paints, who tells stories across every medium he can touch. A man who took the very things that were supposed to destroy him and turned them into fuel for his greatest chapter yet. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes this one of the greatest comebacks of our time. And here's the part that Hollywood didn't see coming. The audience is still with him. In fact, they're louder than ever. They're buying tickets. They're streaming his music. They're showing up for him, proving that audiences, not executives, not gossip outlets, decide who survives in this business. It's almost ironic, isn't it? The very system that tried to shut him out is now realizing it can't, because at the end of the day, the people always have the final say. And the people never let Johnny go. Now let's dig a little deeper. Because this resurrection, it didn't happen by accident. It wasn't just a matter of waiting until things blew over. Johnny made choices, smart ones, that anyone, not just celebrities, can learn from. First, he protected his peace. That silence we talked about, that wasn't just avoiding the spotlight. That was him refusing to let negativity control his life. He chose to step away from the noise so he could heal, so he could create, so he could live on his own terms. Second, he diversified his passion. Movies weren't his only outlet. He leaned into music, performing with his band, connecting with audiences in a different way. He explored art, he stepped into directing. He spread his creativity across different platforms so that no single door could lock him out completely. And third, he stayed connected to his people. His fans, his collaborators, his true friends, they weren't just background characters in his story. They were lifelines. They were reminders that no matter how loud the criticism was, there were still people who believed in him. These three choices, protecting peace, diversifying passion, and staying connected, were the foundation of his resurrection. And here's the beautiful part. They're not just celebrity strategies. They're life strategies. How many times do we fight so hard to change someone's opinion of us when in reality the best way to prove ourselves is through consistency? That's exactly what Johnny did. He didn't beg Hollywood to take him back. He didn't try to win over people who had already turned their backs. He simply kept creating, kept showing up, and let time do its work. And isn't that a lesson for all of us? That when the world doubts you, you don't need to waste your breath trying to convince them. You just need to keep showing up. Eventually, the results will speak louder than anything else. Now take a moment and imagine being in his place. Imagine being told that your career, the thing you've poured your entire life into, is finished. Imagine losing deals, losing friendships, losing the respect of people you once trusted, all while being watched by millions. That kind of weight could crush a person. It could break anyone. But Johnny turned that silence into strength. He turned rejection into fuel, and now, here we are. In 2025, Johnny Depp isn't just surviving. He's thriving. He's standing taller than before, not because Hollywood welcomed him back, but because he proved he didn't need their approval in the first place. That's why this story matters. Because it shows that no matter how deep the fall, there's always a way back up. And sometimes, the very people who tried to bury you end up proving your strength. So, do you think Hollywood underestimated Johnny Depp? And what's the biggest lesson you take away from his journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, there's another video you'll want to check out. It dives even deeper into the struggles he faced when the cameras weren't rolling. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. And hey, if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps us keep telling the stories Hollywood doesn't want you to hear. But more importantly, it keeps this community growing. A space where comebacks aren't just possible, they're celebrated. Because comebacks aren't just for celebrities. They're for you. They're for anyone who's ever been knocked down, told they couldn't, or made to feel like it was over. If Johnny Depp can rise again, so can you. And remember, it's not about how hard you fall. It's about how many times you get back up. And right now, the world is witnessing one of the greatest comebacks of all time.